Hi, hello everyone. This is a recorded lecture for last week because we were out due to snow, unfortunately. So, health promotions, have been affecting doctor and patient behavior. So, ads are not new to pharmaceuticals or drugs or obviously our country. Basically, ever since print media has been around, we've been using ads, and before that, of course, people went into the street and hollered and used word of mouth to let people know about whatever products they had. Um, Here are some of the ads of the past. So, cocaine, toothache drops, instantaneous cure. Clearly, that's a claim, and we'll talk later in this lecture about when you make a claim that the FDA requires you to do certain things with your ads. So claims being made here. It says for sale by all druggists and gives you some sense of where you can get it, and it's only 15 cents. Good to know. Cocaine drops were cheap, I guess, or maybe that may have been actually expensive at that time. So now we move forward to things like drugs that will help your wife cook breakfast in the morning, and obviously we move beyond these types of sexist ads, and we're doing a better job on that. But just gives you some flavor of just the kind of things that were being stated. You can't see all the text here, but essentially this drug was to make your wife feel good. It was for all kinds of ailments, morning sickness being one, but even all kinds of things. There were a lot of stereotypes about women and their behavior and the kind of drugs they needed to control their behavior, and luckily we moved beyond a lot of that today. Here's one of my favorite. It's just this notion of asthma cigarettes. So again, this is another ad from looks like 1882, and look at their claims. They're saying, look, these cigarettes will cure all kinds of ailments. Asthma, which we know to definitely not be true. It actually makes asthma worse. Foul breath. Imagine that. Cigarettes making your breath better. That doesn't usually happen. Head colds, canker sores, on and on. And here we have not recommended for children under 6. So that's starting to look more like a modern ad where you might see something regarding age on the advertisement. So now moving into the ads of the present, we see that ads are now obviously fancier, but they incorporate well-known figures. Often the ads you see in print media like this replicate what you'd see on TV. It's a much more sophisticated operation. Also, you see there's some info there, and we're going to talk about that later. That was not on the old ads. Things like call your doctor. This is FDA approved. And Cialis. I'm sorry. We've all seen the Cialis ads. We've all, well, especially men, have been harassed by emails from companies trying to sell them Cialis and Viagra and so on. Here's one that makes fun of the ads. This is from a group called Farmed Out, PHARMEDOUT, Farmed Out. And they're essentially just demonstrating all the things that drug companies do to try to get your attention. Obviously, somebody good looking. The drug is called Have It All. When more is not enough, they've made up some disorder, dysphoric social attention, so on and so on. There's actually a website, haveitall.com, where they're trying to just demonstrate kind of all the things they're done to make you think that something is useful, which, and it really isn't. And some of these drugs are basically meant to cure a non-illness and give you whatever you desire in terms of a certain feeling, and that's what they're getting at with this ad. And the web was weird. Also more likely to receive free samples from pharmaceutical companies. So just be aware of that. Versus a hospital setting, for example, doctors in a hospital usually aren't getting marketed to as much. One exception might be a small private hospital where doctors might have more time to sit down and listen to drug reps. But in general, they're just going to be too busy, and it's not a good environment for the drug rep to really develop a relationship. And remember, all this is focused on really pharmaceutical detailers or the people who are advertising to doctors, really working on developing a relationship with those doctors. Some of these people work with each other for years. The same detailer may focus on a particular doc for 10, 15 years. So they really do need to get to know them well and understand their preferences and whether or not they're what can persuade them to agree with the pharmaceutical detailer and so on, so that they can actually sell their products for them, right? That's the long-term goal. Now, here's a chart demonstrating the kind of benefits, the kind of relationships that docs have and the kind of benefits they get from those relationships. So, sorry again. As you can see, free samples are high on the list, right? Drug samples, 78% say they're getting drug samples. And what's next? Food, right? There have been some studies showing that food matters, that food, there's something primal about giving food to someone, and that people feel like they owe you something after you give them some food that is free. So I give you a free meal at the local Indian buffet if I'm the pharmaceutical rep, and now all of a sudden you're feeling like you're indebted to me and you want to hand out my drug and so on. You want to treat me nicely because I treat you so nicely by giving you food, right? So that little bit of food can go a long way, and you see that trick is used a lot. Now it's used less frequently in certain environments, and in some states where the states have really cracked down hard on pharmaceutical companies, they've blocked the food. In some universities, they've blocked providing of food to docs. So you see food being offered a lot less than in the past. All right, and then all these other types of benefits: consulting, being on an advisory board, enrolling patients in trials, and so on, that can lead to doctors receiving some benefit from pharmaceutical companies. All right, a little more on doc behavior. Sometimes if physicians have these relationships with pharmaceutical companies, patients begin to question whether or not the evidence that the doctors are relying on is real evidence. And one of those relationships that can make them wonder about this is when the company sponsors the research that the doctor is doing or the researcher is doing. So there's a question about whether or not influence on research matters or not. And it actually does. So industry-sponsored research usually results in conclusions that favor industry. How is that the case, right? In most cases, science tends not to work. It's hard to get good positive results, but for some reason, industry always gets them, right? They get them because they are potentially biased in some way. They're doing something to lead to favorable outcomes, and that's what we worry about, and that's what patients worry about, frankly, with regards to research and all of the drug approvals that might rely on certain research findings that could potentially be flawed. So industry-sponsored studies are also more likely to lead to favorable conclusions than those that are non-industry studies, and so those are of concern for the average consumer. And on the policy side, those are our concern because we want to really prevent that kind of bias from seeping in to our healthcare system. All right, and drug companies also, in terms of influencing behavior, sponsor a lot of stuff. So 300,000 events. All right, 300,000. That's a lot of connections to doctors. Now, what are we doing about these kind of problems? Well, first thing we have to ask is, are these conflicts necessary? So in class, I talk with students about whether or not we should have these conflicts. Do we need them in order for the system to work? So in order to disseminate drugs, do you need to have these physician advocates for your drugs? These people who go out and say, hey, Cleveland Clinic, I'm a doc at Cleveland Clinic, I think you should use this new drug, despite the fact that it's just a little bit better than the old one. So you need these advocates for you. Do you need those? Is it too hard to find other ways to educate physicians and keep them up to date of what the pharmaceutical options are. And is it too hard to find some other way to do that? And so we have to have drug companies doing that, or can we find a better way? Is the question, right? Well, one thing the universities do to respond to this problem is they require disclosure of the relationship, right? And the amount they require is not that small. It's usually about $10,000. For NIH, it's higher. I think it's at $50,000, if I remember correctly. So for an FDA advisory committee, it's $50,000. So just realize that there are different standards for how much um, money you are allowed to receive from a company um, uh, prior to stating that you actually have some conflict of interest. So we will actually let you have a conflict of interest, but only up to a certain level. And you should ask yourself whether or not that's appropriate. Should it be higher or not? Is 10,000 good enough? Is 50,000 good enough? Why do we let it go so high? Can someone actually be influenced by a lot less money, like $1,000 or $5,000? Um, so that's important to ask as we think about what kind of limits are being set. In France, there are fines for people who don't disclose their relationships, appropriately, up to $40,000. Academic detailing is one response to this problem. So some docs have gotten together and they will work. They in their hospital will actually update other physicians on new medications, and they do that instead of having drug detailers come in. So they may get pharmaceutical detailers come in. They may actually get some information from the detailers to take a look at what they're saying to people, but at the end of the day, academic detailing is really focused on the peer-reviewed literature or any good empirical sources that the academics can find to educate one another about new drugs. All right. The American Medical Student Association has come up with this pledge called Farm Free Pledge. The idea is for doctors to sign this contract indicating that they are not going to engage in work that is likely to lead to some kind of conflict of interest, that they are trying to avoid any kind of interaction with the pharmaceutical company that might make them biased, like food or picking up pens and so on. So the idea is for them to live pharmaceutical influence free. All right, no free lunch is another one where docs try to avoid taking a free lunch from pharmaceutical companies. Then prescription facts is an effort to offer docs with new information on drugs that is not being biased by insurance companies. Sorry, I'm saying insurance. I mean by pharmaceutical companies. Sorry about that. All right. Sorry, according to that graph. Oh, not sure something's happening when I'm moving my mouse around here. Sorry about that. Okay, so you can see that there's variation among the drugs with regards to direct-to-consumer advertising. And there are other types of advertising, right? So each strategy that's used is slightly different depending on the drug, depending on opportunities that arise, and so on. So that's important for you to note. All right, now what do consumers think about ads? Well, it turns out they actually learn something from them. Most say that the ads provide information. They say that the ads help them talk with their doctors, so it gets them prepared to actually go out and engage in conversation with their doctor that they think is actually based on some useful information, and it may or may not be, but at least it gets them talking to the doctor. So we actually generally like this kind of influence. And most say they hear the risk and benefit information. That's useful to know because there are some thoughts that information is stated really quickly and may not be effectively saying much to individuals who are hearing that information. However, despite the fact that they're listening and they're willing to engage in conversation as a result of these ads, they don't seem to be discussing the actual ad with their doctor. So the ad is having some impact on their behavior, but it's not leading them to just go in and say, "Hey, I saw this ad." That may be the case because maybe patients realize that the ad is not particularly geared towards them, and so they have information about something that might be relevant to them, and uh, some particular um, drug they that looks like is geared towards their illness, and they as a result um, may want to actually go in and talk with doctors about it. All right, so 43% say that they were given a drug that they asked about. So this has something to do with doctors wanting to satisfy their patients. So many times patients will ask for things, whereas antibiotics or a certain type of scan like an X-ray or something like that, and doctors will give it to them because they just want to increase their satisfaction, even though the patient may not need whatever it is they're given. So in this case, if the patient comes in and they're all excited about some particular drug, and the doctor thinks, well, it's not going to hurt them, it may not be the best option for them, but if it's not going to hurt them, the doctor may actually say, oh, okay, well, let's just, why don't you just go ahead and try that? And so they may get that to increase their satisfaction. All right, now I want to point out that direct-to-consumer advertising, um, among a set of drugs that the CBO pulled out in 2008, it's going to vary depending on what type of drug you talk about. Again, as we said before, but also that there are only just a few drugs where the direct-to-consumer advertising is much bigger than the detailing to healthcare professionals. So they're spending a lot of money on this direct-to-consumer advertising for certain types of drugs. And one of the main types, of course, is erectile dysfunction. And you should ask yourself, well, why is that the case? Why is the erectile dysfunction so high? And it turns out that it's partially because the drug is being used for purposes that have nothing to do with erectile dysfunction. They have everything to do with people wanting a certain feeling. And so it's important to realize that people in our country will look for a particular type of drug for its feeling and what it does to you, and not necessarily whether it actually treats an illness or not. And a good example of that is students who take drugs to just feel calm prior to taking a test. I know some students take a drug called beta blockers in order to increase their performance on a test because it helps keep them focused and calm. So just realize that some of the direct-to-consumer advertising may focus on certain types of drugs, but it may not have anything to do with the actual indication of the drug. It may have something to do with some other for a while. Man, what's going on? Sorry. There was almost exponential increase there for a while and back in 2003. Well, more like 2001 to 2004. So a lot of growth in pharmaceutical companies detailing during that time. The direct-to-consumer ads tend to focus on drugs that are new. They haven't been around that long, but the detailing focuses on all types of drugs, and it may not necessarily be focused on certain just new drugs. Sorry, actually seeking out. And people are actually not hearing the risk of the drug. So even though people say that they hear the risk, remember 90% said they heard the risk and benefits. Doctors really don't think they're truly hearing it. So perhaps what people mean when they say it is that they hear something about what might go wrong, but they may not hear the exact risks associated with a drug, and that might be what doctors bring out when the patient is in their office. Okay, so I want to ask you some about a ban on direct-to-consumer ads and whether that made sense because you had reading on a moratorium of, sorry, reading on whether there should be a moratorium on direct-to-consumer ads. And you should realize that we are one of the only we are one of the only countries in the world that actually allows direct-to-consumer ads. So this is not something that's common by any stretch of imagination. I think it's only the U.S. and New Zealand. I think it's the other country that actually allows direct-to-consumer ads. So this moratorium would be something that would be in line with other countries. All right. Sorry about this. I'm a little tired here. All right. I want to talk to you some about the different types of ads that are out there. There are product claim ads. So these are ads where a company will say, "Here's a drug, and it's useful for a particular purpose," and then they have to tell you about the risks and benefits of that drug. A reminder ad will just give you the drug's name and won't say the use of the drug. A help-seeking ad will really just talk to you in general about some disease and talk about the condition, and then sort of just provide you the name of a company. But it's really meant to oftentimes just educate people about the fact that they may need something's out there for them, but it doesn't give them the name of the drug, and it doesn't say what the drug does. That's for sure. All right. So here, product claim ads need all these things. They need to provide the drug's name and state where the brand name is and generic name, indicate as FDA approved, indicate as prescription only, and provide some information on the risk and benefits, what's called a fair balance, basically a balanced viewpoint of the risk and benefits, and they can't minimize the risks to people in taking the drugs. Approved age range for the drugs. This information about calling the FDA if there's some problem with the drug. And then also, if you're in a print ad like in a newspaper, you need to have a brief summary. And if you look at newspaper ads for drugs, you'll see this brief summary or magazines. You'll see this brief summary where it's a detailed amount of information. It's essentially what you'd find in a drug label. All right. Then the ads have to mention that a doctor should be sought if someone wants the drug, so that people don't think they can just come in and get it on their own. Then it needs to provide a 1-800 number for any safety problems that arise, or just sorry, not safety problems. This is a 1-800 number just for the company. If you want to contact the company, or you want to go to the company's website, they may provide that information. Here are two examples, and in class I would have asked you which one is an appropriate product claim ad. I think it should be very clear to you that this drug, which is probably mainly meant for adults, shouldn't have a child on the advertisement, and they need much more information. So they need to tell you something about the risk and benefits, tell you to ask your doctor, as the ad on the left does, give you more information and so on. So the one on the left is a pretty good ad. Oh well. Alright, for reminder ad, it doesn't say the name of the condition that the drug treats, but it may just have a quick blurb about the drug. It may just have a quick, just list the name of the drug, but it doesn't necessarily say what the drug is for. Alright, and they have to provide, and it, not sure why it keeps popping back. And so then you can sort of generally find out about this, but you don't know what drug is attached to it, so it's just a help-seeking ad. And from those, you can get some sense of what FDA would care about the most. Now, in addition to FDA looking at these types of ads and deciding whether or not they're providing adequate information, and the Office of Drug Promotion, the FDA does that. In addition to all of that, there are new changes to what the FDA is doing. So there's something called pre-dissemination review. This comes from the FDA amendments that occurred in 2007, but it turns out that in 2012 a draft guidance was developed on this process, and they're really still working on it. So here we are, almost now 6 years out and this process still is not functioning well. But what we do have is the name of the type of ads that they want to go through pre-dissemination review. And what this means is prior to you putting the ad on TV, you would let the FDA take a look at it and give you feedback and tell you how to correct it and so on. So some people think that that is the best way to go uh, for um, for direct-to-consumer ads and figuring out whether or not they're appropriate or not, or at least the ones on TV. So any TV ad for a drug that needs a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy needs to be pre-disseminated to the FDA, and I think you have to get it to the FDA 45 days before your television ad appears on TV. So this is just a way to try to capture some ads that the FDA thinks are going to cause some problems at some point. So ads about Schedule 2 controlled substances like Percocet. You don't see a lot of Percocet ads, and one reason why is the FDA is not really trying to promote that or trying to have companies promote it. Um, and those companies, frankly, don't need to spend a lot of time promoting because they have plenty of takers for their drugs. All right, so I want you to be aware that the FDA is doing this pre-dissemination review, or they at least are developing a process, and they should be doing it sometime soon, where companies voluntarily send in their ads, have the FDA review them, and give them feedback. If the FDA makes some changes, they need to actually resubmit the ad so that the changes are appropriate. Um, Beyond that, the FDA can offer a lot of suggestions for change. They can say, well, we want you to make changes that will shore up your ad so that it's not misleading to people, or that people understand, a particular risk that you seem to overlook, but we know that risk exists and we think it needs to be stated up front to people so they are clear when you advertise to them what this risk is. Or maybe the FDA will say, well, the indication you have for the drug is not appropriate, so you have too many different symptoms in your ad. That was the issue for Yaz, is that Yaz, in the Yaz ads, the company was really trying to claim much more than what the company was for, so that led to some problems for the company that manufactured Yaz. All right, enforcement side. Well, the FDA enforces this, Office of Prescription Drug and Promotion. They can stop companies from making ads if the companies don't adhere to their regulations, and people can be subject to criminal penalties or civil penalties. And companies are really our source of information for the kind of ads that are coming out, so they have to send them to the FDA to keep the FDA informed of what's going on with their ads. But if they don't report and someone sees a bad ad, then they're definitely going to be in trouble. And all you have to do to report this information to FDA is to send an email to badad@fda.gov. So it's quite easy to report bad ads now, and no one has an excuse if you run into one of these ads that is appearing to make a claim, but they don't provide all the risk and benefit information that they should. Then all you have to do is pick up your smartphone and send a quick email to the FDA. All right, so that's it for this time. Sorry about any confusion that may have arisen in my talking here. I'm a bit tired today, but I think I got through everything I wanted to say. If you have any questions, just let me know. You send me questions by email, or if you when you see me in class next Wednesday, just send me questions.